at reducing and preventing violence, and share more about the ongoing efforts at the Community Safety Coordination Center, or CSCC. I'm joined today by the CSCC's Chief Coordinating Officer, Tamara Mahal, CDOT Commissioner Gia Biaggi, DFSS Commissioner Brandy Kanazi, and CPD Superintendent David Brown. This morning, we had our quarterly public safety cabinet meeting, and this is really almost every cabinet member across our city and sister agencies. You may recall that these meetings began in April of 2019, right before I was officially sworn in, because I believe that the root cause public health lens on violence is how we win lasting peace. We hold these meetings every quarter to discuss the priorities of each department and make sure that we are on the same page as to the vision and mission of bringing safety to our city. Obviously, the depth of these meetings has evolved over these now almost 3 years' time. And though these departments often work together on a range of different issues, these meetings are an important opportunity for us to align our priorities around community safety. And as the city leaders with me today will tell you, even if their department's sole focus isn't community safety, the work that they do has an impact on community safety, and we'll talk more about the details of that. CDOT Commissioner Gia Biaggi will tell us how community blight is a contributing factor to violence and a role of infrastructure to improve the quality of life in our neighborhoods. And DFSS Commissioner Brandy Kanazi will talk about her department's work to connect youth and adults to career opportunities and other services. And both of these departments are playing a critical role, not only in implementing ARC, but in the infrastructure dollars that will come down the line. This meeting is but one demonstration of our whole of government approach to violence and prevention and reduction. And I will tell you, it was probably one of the best conversations that I've been in. Very rich, very interactive, a lot of innovative suggestions and ideas that we will be working to implement. So I thanked the entire cabinet, one and all, and the deputies that were on the call. This is how we get things done and move forward in a positive, comprehensive, concrete way to address community violence. While CPD and law enforcement partners focus on daily accountability for themselves, but also for the individuals out in our communities that are wreaking havoc with violence, the work of city departments and my administration is also focused on providing investments and supports to address the root causes of crime. I'm a broken record on this. We cannot just arrest our way out of this problem, but we can invest our way out of this problem for the long haul, and we're very focused on doing just that. One of the latest ways in which we are doing this is through the CSCC. For those of you who don't remember, we launched the CSCC in August of 2021, utilizing the best practices that we learned from our citywide COVID-19 response. Now, some may be saying, wait, COVID and community safety, those are apples and oranges. Well, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. And let me tell you about why we think there are lessons learned from how we have worked as a city and with our community partners to mitigate COVID that make absolute sense in the context of community violence. And Tamara will expand on that. But let me just say, the CSCC's operations and programming are designed to reduce violence using evidence-based practices, sound familiar from COVID, that require cross-sector coordination, same as our approach to COVID, across city departments and agencies to respond and address violence. We are one of the few cities, and I would say the only one, that is doing it at this scale. And it's really building the muscle memory for us to adequately respond to violence and trauma that plagues our communities in the short term, like what we did in support of the family and community of Little Village when the unfortunate murder of Melissa Ortega happened, but also building that muscle memory for the long term and making sure we're supporting our community partners in their aspirations for working and building lasting peace. We know that decades of disinvestment and systemic racism across governmental policies led to the degradation of the physical built environment in too many of our communities. prevented opportunities for education and long-term stable employment, and resulted in a perpetual cycle of trauma for Black and brown communities that persists and is deep to this day. The CSCC works along other city departments to rebuild and beautify the physical built environment of these communities, create a thriving economy with abundant opportunities for education and employment, and to meaningfully support our residents in addressing their individual and family needs. And this work, as I said, has been ongoing since last August, and we have learned a lot and have implemented concrete strategies to move this work forward, and more that we will announce over the coming days and weeks. That's a tease, but I won't tell you all the details. I'll save some of that. One of the critical components to the CSCC is its engagement with communities and organizations, including everything from healthcare to faith-based organizations, local businesses, to inform our response to violence. We are not doing our job if we're not responding to the unique circumstances and the neighborhoods that are most violence-plagued, and listening to the indigenous residents and the stakeholders who are at this work every day and have been, in many instances, for a lifetime. We owe it to them to listen and to make sure that we are reflecting their realities in the work that we are doing. There will be a symposium for community leaders and providers in mental health, substance use, and violence prevention to discuss and plan for a trauma-informed approach to violence reduction in communities highly impacted by violence. And I should say, to build on the work that's already been done. A 3-day trade show that will connect 3,000 graduating seniors with the necessary information and tools to explore a career in the trades. And in a few moments, you'll hear from Tamara Mahal, who will go into further detail on these events and other work of the CSCC. And before I close, I want to speak directly to residents who continue to live in fear in communities plagued by violence. I know, here and in my head and in my heart, that the challenges facing our city are steep, and at times the situation can feel hopeless. But I promise and I commit that the full weight of city government is committed every single day to making life better for everyone in our city, and particularly those in our vulnerable neighborhoods that are feeling and have borne the weight of violence for way too long. I want you to know that we see and hear you, and that we will hear you even more. We learn from you, but importantly, we're here to serve you. Your voice and your lived experiences are an invaluable tool to inform our work. Next up, I will call up Tamara Mahal, who was instrumental in the city's COVID-19 response and leading our vaccine operations, community engagement, and distribution operations. Tamara has gratefully agreed to serve in another capacity, and which is leading the work of the CSCC, for which she is eminently qualified. She displays a tireless commitment to advancing equity, implementing community-driven strategies, and expertise in solving complex problems. And I just heard from someone this morning, so I'm going to embarrass her a little bit, what a joy it is to work with her. She's determined, she is focused, and she is getting the work done, which is not easy. As someone said to me, doing the people's work is not easy. And Tamara, every single day, is doing the people's work. So, Tamara, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Tamara Mahal. I'm the Chief Coordinating Officer of Community Safety for the Mayor. And I do want to start by thanking Mayor Lightfoot for her leadership and understanding that when you face issues that are as complex as violence and community safety, you need to commit and dedicate the resources and staffing to support the coordination necessary to support the community. So thank you, Mayor. The COVID-19 pandemic taught us that when government uses a data-driven, evidence-based approach, and most importantly, deeply partners with community, we're able to create and implement equitable and impactful programs. The Community Safety Coordination Center is designed based on that success. We are working with community organizations in violence prevention, healthcare, social services, our education partners, and restorative justice to develop community safety strategies that are centered on the needs of communities. Representatives from our infrastructure, social services, and public safety departments, the majority of which are not just dedicated public servants, but also residents living in the very communities that they are trying to help, are working hard to support these community-driven strategies, breaking silos across their departments, and providing the comprehensive resources needed to provide a truly whole-of-city approach to support our communities. The partnership between our community organizations, and I just want to take a second to thank our partners at Enlace, New Life Christian Center, North Lawndale Community Coordinating Council, Teamwork Inglewood, and the Garfield Park Right to Wellness Collaborative, along with our partners in faith and other areas, have helped us to identify the efforts that are needed to address violence and community safety issues, not just in the long term, but also in the near term. Knowing that we need to combat the perpetual cycle of trauma in communities of color faced in Chicago today, we are working with community partners and providers in mental health, substance use, and violence prevention to implement a trauma-informed response to violence. Knowing that when neighbor relationships are strong, their blocks are better cared for, and they are more willing to intervene on each other's behalf, we are working to expand our support and resources for block clubs and build a safer environment. Knowing that our youth need educational and career opportunities during and after high school, we're working across departments on a variety of youth programming, but soon a 3-day youth trade expo that will connect youth who need additional supports and identify opportunities with our trades and our unions that may benefit them following high school. Knowing that justice-involved individuals need better pathways to employment, mental health services, and housing, we're establishing coordination mechanisms at the community level that allow for those pathways to exist between law enforcement, social services, violence prevention, and criminal justice partners. Knowing that social media has a role in shaping real-life interactions and leading to violence, we're working with our community partners to develop anti-violence marketing campaigns across the city that will increase individual and collective responsibility for violence. And our hope is to decrease disrespectful online behavior that we know often leads to those real-life interactions. And knowing that improvements in the physical environment contribute to a healthy community ecosystem with reduced levels of violence, we will improve the streetscape and proactively create safe spaces to live, work, and play. To tell us more about that important work occurring on behalf of our infrastructure departments, who have been great partners to us in this effort, I am happy to introduce Chicago Department of Transportation Commissioner Gia Biaggi.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Mayor, for your galvanizing this really what is an incredible initiative, bringing the whole of government to the table to make improvements on our challenges with violence. So I'm here as Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, but I represent a cohort of infrastructure departments that are putting what we know how to do in service of keeping our streets free from violence. Working in partnership with the CSCC, we are applying a data-informed and asset-based approach. We are investing in our streets, our sidewalks, our public spaces to transform them into safe, welcoming, and vibrant places. You know, streets free from violence is in fact a pillar of the City of Chicago's strategic plan for transportation. Now, one part of that effort is certainly our work to prevent injuries and fatalities from traffic violence. Another part of that effort, though, is our place-based work, specifically focused on areas of the city experiencing outsized levels of violence. We have oriented our citywide construction and maintenance programs to focus on places in our city down to the specific blocks. We're talking a block-by-block strategy to those blocks that are most challenged by violence. So what does that look like, right? That looks like making sure streetlights are working, that potholes are filled, that's planting trees, that's cleaning up vacant lots, and it's engaging communities in the design and use of their streets, our streets, together. So we understand and deliver what safe, welcoming, and vibrant means at a local level. Why does this matter? Because we know that the quality of the built environment is related to those complex roots of violence. Coordinated maintenance and infrastructure investments can make a big difference. The street trees we plant, they'll reduce stress and anxiety. The plazas and the parks, those improve social cohesion. They build trust. The streetscapes bring economic activity and eyes on the street. These are all parts of the ecosystem of public safety. A great example of our work together with the CSCC's leadership has been the Neighborhood Activation Initiative. So CDOT partnered with the Park District, the Public Library, the Department of Assets and Information Services, Streets and Sand, the Chicago Public Schools, and local community-based organizations like the Garfield Park Right to Wellness Initiative to build safe spaces, like that new roller rink at Madison and Pulaski, and community gathering spaces at Legler Library, and coming soon, a brand new play street designed by students at Melody Elementary School. I was just out there last week with the kids as they were reimagining their street, reimagining a way to connect all of those spaces together as a network, to create a network of safe spaces that are activated by residents, by people who are connected to the place and to one another. Last year, the mayor led a program called Open Boulevards that we did on a couple of boulevards. We had Drexel Boulevard, we had Logan, and we had Independence Boulevard on the west side. And, I went out there for the event, and all we did was we closed the streets. We invited churches and community groups, just take over the streets, put up some tables. We threw a bunch of bikes on the street and roller skates, and kids and families started coming out of their houses. And, it's great, Sunday, sunny day. And I had a chance to talk with Pastor Rashorna, who's over at Stone Temple Baptist Church over there. And she said, we work so hard all the time to create events and get kids out and playing again. And you just closing this street and putting some bikes out there and just inviting people to use their street in a different way, kids came. They never come. They came today. And that, I think, is the power of what we can do with whether it's the maintenance, whether it's the infrastructure, but it's what we have our hands on as part of government here. When we listen to communities, we create those moments of safe space that fundamentally change lives. So that's why I'm here today on behalf of the infrastructure departments, thinking a lot about physical infrastructure. But I'm going to pass the microphone to my colleague, Commissioner Kanazi, who is all about the human infrastructure. And when these things dovetail, you will see the kind of city that is safe and welcoming and inviting for everyone. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Brandy Kanazi, and it is my honor and privilege to lead the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. DFSS is dedicated to ensuring that all Chicagoans have access to the services they need to recognize their full potential and lead full, enriching lives. We are excited to partner with the Community Safety Coordination Center to build on the work we are already doing to support returning residents, young people seeking connections to meaningful experiences, individuals in need of housing supports, and survivors of domestic violence. This year, DFSS will use $20 million in Chicago Recovery Plan funding to expand violence prevention services for our youth, many of whom have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. That investment will also support the Skills Trades Fair in March that will be hosted in partnership with the CSCC, the Mayor's Office, Chicago Public Schools, and the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership. The career fair will provide at-risk youth with high-quality exposure to programming, relaying the groundwork for opportunity and engaging young people in pathways to the future. Young women that have been justice involved have been left behind in considerations at times for intervention services, so DFSS is taking initiative to address this head on. The newest part of our intervention strategy involves a partnership with the U.S. Department of Justice to serve 100 young women that have been justice involved, providing them with self-empowerment trainings and other wraparound services. Thanks to Mayor Lightfoot's commitment to the young people of this city, we are also investing $75 million into opportunities that help young people heal, grow, and thrive. In just a few weeks, One Summer Chicago online applications will be open to the city's youth. This will total over 10,000 employment and public service opportunities with DFSS alone. In addition, we are extending our civic leadership program, the Chicago Youth Service Corps, to a year-round public service initiative. And Mayor, I just want to say that we're really grateful for the support we have on this initiative. It really helps young people expand and create civic engagement opportunities and solve problems in their own communities.
And yes, folks, this is a big deal.
All of these opportunities are paid, with participants earning $15 an hour and providing weekly stipends to 14 and 15-year-olds in our Chicago Ability program. Our goal is to help as many young people as possible foster a sense of purpose and community. This is a crucial investment in our future of our city. Previous reports from the University of Chicago Urban Labs found that one summer Chicago reduced violent crime arrests by 43% over 16 months. We are also supporting the expansion of the popular My Shy, My Future initiative to increase opportunities for out-of-school programming and linkages to caring adults in communities most impacted by violence. We also extend similar opportunities for growth and healing to adults and families. Our 4 community reentry support centers and 6 community service centers throughout the city provide central locations where Chicago residents can receive services needed to work, grow, and thrive. With Mayor Lightfoot's support and a $10 million investment, we can bring on more partners into our reentry programming and connect more people to opportunities necessary to achieve success with that second chance. Individuals can find the nearest reentry center by calling 311 or going to chicago.gov/FSS. Finally, through a $25 million investment, we will expand our services for survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence, including administering emergency funds, legal assistance, prevention education, housing, and other coordination services. Community, opportunity, purpose. These are the key ingredients to unlocking the potential in our city and our neighbors, and these new investments will bring our residents closer to all 3. We thank Mayor Lightfoot and our partners for their steadfast resolve in addressing safety from a community-wide perspective. Next, I would like to introduce Superintendent Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kanazi and Biaggi, and thank you, Tamara and Mayor. Thank you very much. So you often hear, what's the plan? What's the plan? What's the plan for public safety? Well, visibility is part of the plan. So is engagement part of the plan. But as you see, collaboration across city departments to include our stakeholders in the community is the plan. For the Chicago Police Department, the plan also includes our 5-point+1 plan, which includes reform. It includes community engagement. It includes officer wellness, as well as improving our investigations and public safety enforcement. So that's the plan. When you hear the question, what's the plan, what's the plan, what's the plan? Just a little bit of a status report of public safety today. As of today, shootings are down 5%. Year to date, carjackings are down 10%. And homicides are down 1%. Homicide clearance rates are at 58%, and we see 1,645 guns from the streets of Chicago. Public safety is fundamentally connected to public health, and both remain our top priority. But that requires taking a good long look at the city's public safety picture for an informed, collaborative approach. That's why the Chicago Police Department works with city partners and community stakeholders at every level to address the root causes of crime and violence. That's also the importance of the Community Safety Coordination Center, also known as CSCC. The center sits at the intersection of violence prevention and community empowerment, connecting residents to all city resources. Law enforcement is only a piece of the puzzle. Thoughtful and robust community engagement is another. Some of the City of Chicago's Police Department's effort include our neighborhood policing initiative. As a part of this effort, 150 district coordination officers, or DCOs, work with community members to identify and de-escalate issues before they become more serious and potentially violent crimes. This is one of the ways we are getting officers out from behind desk, out of their squad cars, and out into the community. The neighborhood policing initiative is in 10 of our 22 districts, but we are working to expand this initiative citywide, as well as implement a new 160-hour training for our DCOs. We also have liaison officers in every district for outreach for historically underrepresented groups across the city. Chicago Police Department understands it takes a not only whole-of-government approach to improve public safety, but it also, I want to be clear, that the men and women of the Chicago Police Department stand vigilant in confronting crime in all forms. One crime is one too many. And let me say it again, the Chicago Police Department will be relentless in pursuing and holding anyone accountable for committing crimes or engaging in illegal activity. That includes carjacking and organized retail theft crimes, as we've seen. And as you know, the city has experienced an uptick in these areas in recent months, but our collaboration is netting results. Looking at vehicular hijackings, as I mentioned, they're down 10%. Our organized retail theft task force has focused on bringing crews, these organized retail smash and grab crews, to justice, charging them with the highest charge that we can for these crimes. We're working collaboratively on both fronts. Both carjacking task force works regionally across the city, as well as to our suburbs, as well as our organized retail theft task force works across the state, and many times across state lines in the black market where these stolen goods are sold. The department has made major arrests thanks to this tireless effort and key relationships with agencies like BACP and our neighboring law enforcement agencies, and more importantly, the business community. This private-public collaboration proves that what happens when we work together can be effective. But a complete law enforcement approach is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Dealing with the consequences of crime is one thing, but we have to address the root causes or the origins. That's why the meeting we had today, our Public Safety Cabinet meeting that listened to the Community Safety Coordination Center's report, is so important. Public safety is about all of us, and we all have a part to play in stopping violence. And now I'll turn it back over to the mayor to take a few questions. Mayor.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. We'll kick it off with Alex Nitkin from the Daily Land. Go ahead, Alex.
We have off-topic questions. I don't know if you want to come back to me.
Anyone with on-topic questions? All right.
Over here.
Try it.
Yeah, I'll let my colleagues do the heavy lifting, but
Thank you for caring.
Mayor, first I want to ask about the public engagement. I know that there are groups, as you said, that have been doing this kind of work for decades, and they are involved. But we have occasionally heard complaints from some people in neighborhoods that say, but our voices, we're not part of that group that knows how to do the grants and everything like that.
Right.
And how do those people who aren't the establishment that's been there for the decades also get their concerns or maybe their ideas heard?
That's a great question, and it's something that I care deeply about, and I'm going to answer it, I guess, from a couple of different vantage points. As you know, we have an abundance of resources thanks to ARP dollars, our own bond work, but other resources that we are very focused on. $1.2 billion as investments is what we plan to make. And we started thinking about the very point that you raised last fall. And my first trip to Washington to talk to the ARP czar, Gene Sperling, but also thinking ahead to infrastructure, but really focused on ARP, I raised the question of how do we make sure that these dollars get down to the block level, particularly because the Treasury compliance requirements are intense. And they require you to have a CFO, an audit team, administrative. And we know that a lot of the community-based organizations who are great at doing the work, they don't have that kind of back office infrastructure. So we've been very focused on this issue from day one. So what have we done to try to address it? A couple things. Number one, 3 weeks back, we held a readiness summit. And we did a lot of engagement with community-based organizations ahead of time to let them know what was coming, what they needed to do to get themselves prepared. And we had over 1,200 people at its height, representing literally thousands of organizations across the city participating in that. So the lesson here is engagement, 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 transparency, listening, and then continuing to do that engagement. It wasn't a one and done. The other thing that we've really encouraged, and we're starting to see this take hold, is helping support those smaller community-based organizations that don't have that back office infrastructure to make sure that we are pulling on pro bono resources and other activities to get them the supports that they need to do the work, but also make sure that we're going to be in compliance with our Treasury Department reporting obligations. So I've got to thank the Chicago Community Trust for really diving in, and Dr. Helene Gale, but you're going to see that back office infrastructure, if you will, stood up to help support those community organizations. But really, I think kind of a thread of what you're talking about is, hey, I'm not one of these big, organizations. How do I make sure that my voice is heard? And that's why I can't emphasize enough. We are talking to our community partners similarly to what we did through COVID, literally at the block level. And Tamara, I don't know if you want to jump in and provide a little more content around what that kind of looks like literally on a daily basis.
Thank you, Mayor. I think to that point, we do consistently hear from smaller organizations that are on the ground and in the field working at the block level that they have ideas that need to be recognized. Yes, they need resource support, certainly funding, and that they need to be at the table. We recognize that. At the CSCC, we have been doing block level focus groups, workshops. In December, we held scenario-based discussions where representatives from 60 different organizations and individual communities were invited to speak to each other and provide feedback about violence reduction and coordination, and that included some of our smaller organizations. We have committees set up that, yes, actually include some of the larger organizations that are receiving some of this funding, but actually also include a lot of smaller organizations, especially from survivor groups, victim services, and others that are providing support. And I'd also note we're beginning an extensive engagement process that goes through town halls and the public to say, help us here, tell us what your ideas are, and I think most importantly, what are the resources that are necessary to even get down to the homeowner to say, how can we support you in being safe and staying safe? For us, that's a multi-layered engagement strategy. And one thing I'll note that I think is different about the city's approach around this is the actual hiring of staff who are specifically working in our communities to go door to door, funded by foundations and community partners, to actually be able to solicit and work with that, who have a direct line back to the CSCC, not only to provide feedback on those strategies, but importantly, to say, I need resources. Yes, sometimes that's funding, but the government's also here to provide other types of resources, and you would be surprised the amount of trust we can build by when a smaller organization says, hey, I'm having an event and I need a portable toilet, and the government comes through and says, yeah, we can support that. How much trust that can build and how we can engage with them on that level that leads to those productive conversations and helps us to guide our strategies.
Charlie, NBC.
Thank you. My question is for the superintendent. A lot of this seems to be talking about building relationships, building trust, but in wake of the OIG report yesterday that still suggests there's discrepancies in the way that people are treated because of their race and because of their ethnicity. How do you hope to build that trust, especially in the most affected communities?
So let me correct you a little bit on the premise for your question. So the OIG report actually specifically said they did not see disparities in the analysis of the data from 2017 to February 2020 as relates to race. It specifically outlines that. But what it did outline, this was specific words out of the OIG report. by quote. So correct that. But what it did outline that's important, I think, is number one, we're on the right track as it relates to what the progress we've made in the consent decree since February of 2020. We've made significant progress by way of policy improvements. Training at that point in February 2020 was zero for officers. Mandatory training since then, every officer is required to complete 40 hours of training annually. In addition, at that point during this analysis, 17 to 2020, we had not come into compliance as it relates to our use of force policies. Today, we are in compliance with the consent decree as it relates to our use of force policies. In addition, training, policy changes, and accountability is night and day from 2017 through February 2020, and we're awaiting the next independent monitors report, IMR 5, and we suspect that we will have even more significant compliance with the consent decree than we've had in the past. And lastly, at that point during this analysis, I think our compliance level was 11% with the consent decree. Our previous reporting period was 52%. We expect that to be even higher when we get the report either at the end of this month or the beginning of April. So it just encourages us to continue with our significant progress with the consent decree based on the OIG's report findings. So,
All right, AD Quigg from.
He can have the follow. He can have the follow.
Go ahead, Charlie.
The question wasn't so much about compliance, but it's how do you build that trust? Even though you and I disagree about what the report said, I think that the message is out there that there are discrepancies.
So I would say there are some clues to how you build trust. One clue is what were clearance rates then, what are clearance rates now? Clearance rates during that period as low as 20%. Clearance rates are about people trusting you enough as a police officer to give you information to help solve a crime. As I recounted in my opening comments, clearance rates now are at 58%. The number of homicides cleared last year was a 19-year high number. We are higher than that this year, on pace to be higher than the 19-year high that we had last year. So I think one of the clues about building trust is, are your clearance rates improving? Because that speaks to people trusting you enough to help you with information to help you clear crimes. So hope that answers your question. Yep.
AD.
Mayor, this question's for you. What are your requests from legislators for
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just having a hard time hearing
Sure.
you.
What are your requests from legislators for anti-crime legislation in Springfield? We've seen some stuff come out about organized retail theft. Have you made any headway on electronic monitoring and court release changes?
We continue to engage with our Springfield partners. We've made it very clear to them what our priorities are, electronic monitoring obviously being one of them, ghost guns being another issue that, frankly, I'd love you and the media to talk more about, because I think it is a very clear, dangerous threat to public safety to have these unserialized guns that can literally be made in a kit at home. I think we've got to challenge not only the producers and manufacturers of these weapons. The other thing that we are very focused on, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we're seeing a lot of things happening on social media platforms that are a direct threat to public safety, whether it's the beefs that start that then translate into violence on the street, whether it's the illegal sales of weapons on these social media platforms. So again, I'll speak more about that in the coming days, but that's something that we're also talking to our Springfield partners about. But I feel comfortable with the direction that the package is moving in, and as I said, we're very much engaged with our partners in Springfield. We sat down before the session even began, myself with Speaker Welch and with President Harmon, to kind of lay down our list of priorities. And I know that they understand them, and they're going to be working hard with us to make sure that we get meaningful legislation over the finish line this session before they adjourn for the election.
Thanks, Mayor. Craig Wall, ABC.
Mayor, a question for you and then one for the superintendent. If we look at the CompStat numbers, they show year-to-date that every area of crime is up except for shootings, which is only down slightly. How does community partners?
I don't think that that's
I just
correct.
looked at the latest ones on there, and
I don't. I'm going to trust what the superintendent tells me. I'm going to trust what I hear at my weekly meetings. Let me just finish. So I just don't think that's factually correct, but go ahead.
Well, this was compared to last year at this point.
Yeah, and you just heard from the superintendent. We track week over week comparatively, and we track month over month, and we track year over year.
Yeah, well, the ComStat numbers that are out, the latest ones on CBD's website, do not reflect that. Let me ask a question here. How do you gauge how much these community groups are actually helping reduce crime? Is there some way that you're factoring how that makes a difference?
Yeah, I think you or one of your colleagues asked this same question last week, and I'll start and then invite the superintendent to come in. Look, it is what I think the value add is, and I assume what you're talking about is, violence intervention. Let me just make sure we're talking about the same thing. Street intervention groups. Is it? Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. I think the value add is significant. Number one is, in many instances, these are individuals themselves that have grown up in those communities and previously been in the life. And so when they intervene and work with young people, they bring a level of credibility to the work that no sworn officer or anyone else is going to have, because they walk the walk. And now they're saying there's a different way. Here's the off-ramp. Let us help you do that. That is tremendously valuable. And I think study after study that's looked at these models as they've evolved over the last 10, 20, 15 years, I think really speak to that issue. The other thing that I think is important is working in conjunction with these organizations, these men that I walk the street with, and are mostly men across the city, is they provide information about a brewing conflict at a very granular level that helps us diffuse that conflict using a lot of different tools, some of which is law enforcement, some of which is, I would call, more soft power tools that we can use in communities. So for my money, and it is our money, we've invested heavily in this work over the course of our 3 budgets, and significantly this year. The value add is really significant. And we will continue to make sure that we work with those partners, hold them accountable like we do anybody else, because these are our taxpayer dollars, but being very heavily in this work personally, working with these organizations, whether it's on the west side or the south side, they are an important part of our effort to build healthy and safe communities.
Alex Sitkin.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we just get some updates?
Make sure that we give 2 questions and follow
from you on these recent attacks on the Red Line, the CTA, and if you've got anything to tell us about the 12-year-old who was shot yesterday.
Sure. And let me take also an opportunity to talk a little bit about the data that you recounted a little differently than the way you asked. So again, shootings are down 5%, carjackings are down 10%, and homicides are down 1%. That's this point this year compared to this same point last year. What you recounted is mostly property crime has taken an uptick after a historically low 5 years of decline in property crimes. Property crimes is uptick this year compared to last, but still below 2019's property crimes. So we still are tracking in opposite directions property crime historic lows, like a 55-year low in property crimes, versus gun violence. Obviously, the last 2 years being significantly up, similar to the mid-1990s. And that diagnosis is important for you to report so we don't take the wrong prescriptions, because many people want to prescribe mass incarceration again for what we are experiencing now. And that is, again, a failure, and when we did it back in the 80s and 90s, and it would be a failure today. The right diagnosis is we have a gun violence problem. Crime, property crime, is at historical lows. The majority of crime is property crime. So again, an uptick in property crime this year versus last year, but still lower this year than 2019. And still a 50-year low in property crime. Gun violence is specifically the challenge we have. Now, to the CTA and to the shooting of the 12-year-old. CTA, we have obviously video. There's great video on this particular incident. We are following up on leads. We feel confident that we'll be able to identify this offender in some way or another. We do need the public's help. Anyone that knows anything about this particular crime on the CTA, please come forward. There is a up to $15,000 reward for you, and you can remain anonymous. Secondly, the 12-year-old that was shot, unfortunately, on yesterday evening, it was after celebrating her birthday, leaving her birthday dinner. The Chicago Police Department will bring the full force of this department to solve this crime. This was heinous, reckless, senseless, and the gangs involved, and you know who you are, we're coming after you. We're coming after you. We want to send a strong message to these violent offenders that this won't be tolerated in the city of Chicago, and that there will be a price to pay in the criminal justice system for you. So the full brunt of every resource we have will bear down on the gang responsible for this. Officers will work around the clock. Homicide detectives will be relentless in solving this crime. We'll again solicit the public help. If you know anything about any of these offenders, there's some video that we're going through. There's cars that we're trying to identify, but the people were on the street when this happened, so someone knows something that can solve this crime. If you come forward, you can come forward anonymously, and you can receive up to a $15,000 reward for any information leading to charges and or convictions for this crime.
Alex from Daily Eye.
Hi, Mayor. I wanted to ask about the Inspector General search process. We're coming up on 5 months without a permanent IG. Why has the process been taking so long? When should we expect you to come out with a name of a nominee? And is it damaging to the credibility and independence of this office to go so long without a city council confirmed watchdog?
No, let me take your last of your 4 questions first.
1 3-part.
Okay, fine. Interesting math. Look, we need to find the right leader for the Inspector General's office. I believe very, very strongly in the importance of the Inspector General. The office has to be strong, it has to have a great leader, and it needs to be independent. As you well know, there is a committee that has been hard at work, some appointed by the City Council, members that are appointed by myself, and the leader of that is someone that I think has tremendous integrity. Peggy Daly is a lawyer, a very experienced investigator herself, has served on the Cook County Board of Ethics for a number of years. I met her years ago when we were young lawyers, but I really got to know her well when we worked together on the BGA board. So it's interesting, I've seen some of the BGA commentary about critical of the process of one of their former board presidents. So just factor that in. They're hard at work. The process is coming to a conclusion, and once I have the opportunity to meet with the finalists, which I anticipate happening relatively soon, then we'll be making a recommendation to the City Council. But this is a really important position, and it's important that we get it right and not interfere in the screening committee's work. And they've done, I think, a terrific job, and we'll be announcing what we can announce as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Mayor. That's a wrap. Thank you, everyone.
Let him follow up his question.
Presented you with the list of finalists, and now
I didn't say that. I said that they've been hard at work, and that when we have something to report, we will report it as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.